After the original Call of Duty hit store shelves, it would take another 2 years before gamers would see the next official installment in the series. In the meantime, consoles did have their own Call of Duty experiences that weren't developed by Infinity Ward, but gamers at the time would agree that they didn't live up to what most considered to be Call of Duty standards. Players and developers alike began to wonder if Call of Duty magic could only be cast by the Encino, California developers, Infinity Ward. The second official installment to the Call of Duty franchise, Call of Duty 2, graced PCs on October 25, 2005. Then a few weeks later, on November 15th, it hit store shelves for the Xbox 360, a mere week before the launch of the console itself. Statistically, Call of Duty 2 sold well. In fact, it was the most popular Xbox 360 launch title, with 250,000 copies sold in its first week alone. 77% of the people who bought an Xbox 360 during launch week also purchased Call of Duty 2. On Metacritic, the Xbox 360 version averaged a whopping 89%, while the PC version achieved a slightly lower score of 86%. Based on those numbers, some may assume that the PC version was considered a poor port from the console version at first glance. But in reality, the PC version of Call of Duty 2 sported a more impressive list of features that included a faster frame rate, higher resolution, and more viewable characters on the playing field. In terms of online play, PC matches could support 32 players at a time, while the Xbox 360 could only hold a piddling 8. While the Xbox 360 version received slightly higher praise, it was because all previous console entries paled in comparison to what the PC versions had to offer. This was the first official numbered sequel of the series to hit the market. Thanks to the new powerhouse of the Xbox 360, it was the first time a console version of Call of Duty was considered near equals with its PC counterpart. The PC version, on the other hand, was seen as a step back in the series' direction in the eyes of PC gamers. Despite the cries of outrage from some, most of the changes made to the series are still in place today. The first and quite possibly largest change made was the implementation of regenerating health. Regenerating health was not a new concept in 2005. The practice had been in place since 1992's Faceball 2000, but it was made popular by Halo 2, which had hit and dominated the first-person shooter console market the year before.
Smoke grenade out there! Yes, sir! Try to hit the boxes through the smoke!
Giving the player regenerating health meant that there was less clutter on the heads-up display. To further improve screen real estate, ammunition only appeared on the screen when firing or reloading. The only permanent item on screen was the compass in the lower left-hand corner. More viewable game space allowed gamers to further immerse themselves into the cinematic experience that Infinity Ward crafted. Two fantastic features that were put into place with United Offensive were strangely taken away in Call of Duty 2. Sprinting and the use of deployable and mountable machine guns both got the axe. While neither affected the single-player aspect of the game that much, fans of the multiplayer portion of the games were outraged. Even today, it is much easier to find multiplayer matches for United Offensive than it is to find matches for the graphically superior Call of Duty 2. And finally, Infinity Ward decided to cast aside historical accuracy in favor of a more cinematic presentation, something that would become more of a trend as graphics and animation improved. Like its predecessors, Call of Duty 2 was broken down into 3 major campaigns: the Russians, the British, and the Americans. Unlike the original Call of Duty and its expansion, gamers didn't play the opening training levels as the more predictable Americans or the British. Instead, players controlled a soldier from the technologically impoverished, but soldier-rich, Red Army. Players controlled Private Vasily Kozlov of the 13th Guards Rifle Division. Training for the Russians was improvised. Potatoes were used as hand grenades, coat racks were used in hand-to-hand combat, and for firing exercises, they actually fought back an invading squad of German troops and some light mechanized units.
There is no better training, comrade, than fighting to survive.
The entire Red Army campaign is fought to reclaim Stalingrad from Nazi forces after their blitzkrieg attack had failed. Players follow Private Kozlov in negative 30 degrees Celsius weather to repair Allied communication lines, recapture railroad stations by sneaking through pipelines, and eventually, they wrap up their street warfare by reclaiming and defending Stalingrad City Hall.
Looks like our numbers didn't come up today. Not yet, anyways.
The British Forces campaign focused on two separate soldiers' stories. Players follow the exploits of Sergeant John Davis in a sneak attack in northern Egypt in the Battle of El Alamein. Later, they fight the notorious Afrika Korps in Tunisia. And to wrap up Sergeant Davis's experiences, players took part of the battle for Caen in Normandy, France. Captain Price also makes an appearance as a member of the 7th Armored Division, but it's interesting to note that he's dressed in a British paratrooper's uniform instead of a standard infantryman's fatigues. He looks the same as he appeared in the first Call of Duty.
Whatever you say, sir.
Players also controlled British tank commander David Welsh, also known as Fox 3. The tank missions in Call of Duty 2 were much faster in pace and shorter in length than the tank missions in the original Call of Duty. That is mostly due to the fact that the Crusader light tank had a much shorter range than the German Panzer tank. The British had to strike hard and move in quickly to attack at close range. When players finally unlocked the American campaign, gamers were dazzled by the 2nd Ranger Battalion missions at Pointe du Hoc, Hill 400, and the crossing of the Rhine in Wallander, Germany. Infinity Ward saved the best for last, as the American missions were considered the cream of the crop. Atmospherically, they were the most pleasing. The voice acting was phenomenal, and the missions were well balanced. There was an intentional familiarity about the American missions that made them more accessible than the rest. Since the landings at Omaha Beach had already been done in Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and the 101st Airborne Division's famous missions had already been covered in the original Call of Duty and its expansion, there was little to no wiggle room to help benefit from the successes of the film Saving Private Ryan and the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. So Infinity Ward got crafty, and altered history to make the Pointe du Hoc landings appear to be similar to Saving Private Ryan.
30 seconds, Yanks! God be with you!
Hey, Brayburn, you look like you're gonna puke.
You know what, Donnie? Why don't you just...
Dog Company, listen up! Men on the beaches are counting on us to take out the coastal guns on those cliffs. Move fast, get topside, and get the job done!
Incoming! Get down! This is it! Firing rockets! Let's go! Let's go!
In reality, the Rangers landing at Pointe du Hoc was nothing like this. As the Rangers approached the beach, the cliffs were being fired upon by the USS Satterley, the Gleaves-class destroyer which had been suppressing most of the German defenders from firing down the cliffs. There were between 10 to 15 casualties at the beach from a machine gun that was out of their range far off to the east. The Rangers only lost one landing craft from enemy fire, and even it was only carrying supplies. Once they reached the top, however, the Rangers did take heavy casualties. By the evening of June 8th, the original force of 255 Rangers from D, E, and F companies had suffered 80 casualties, with another 55 wounded or missing. The heavy bombed-out environment and impact craters on top of the point, however, were very real. In fact, most of the craters in the German trenches and pillboxes are still viewable today. To further familiarize players with the experience, Infinity Ward brought in a few recognizable voices, mostly from Band of Brothers. James Medeo, Michael Cudlitz, Frank John Hughes, Rick Gomez, Ross McCall, Renee L. Moreno, and Richard Speight Jr. all brought their voice talent to the game. Joshua Gomez, who is now famous for NBC's Chuck, and Nolan North of video game voice acting fame, also added their talents to the mix. Call of Duty 2 had a polarizing effect on gamers. Many fans of the original saw it as a giant step back in the series. However, since Call of Duty 2 reached an untapped market with the Xbox 360, its new home would be solidified on consoles for years to come.